I was fortunate to spend Thanksgiving with my wife's family in Southern California, and I hope you too had a chance to be with friends or family on Thanksgiving. One of the things that I really like about Thanksgiving is that opportunity that it gives us to pause for a moment and to be mindful of all that we have to be thankful for. And truth be told, I think most of us have a heck of a lot to be thankful for. But for me at least, it kind of grounds me and reminds me of those important things in my life, my family, and my friends, and where I think I really gain strength and support. And I think being able to call to mind those things that we're thankful for is especially important as we have now entered into what for many of us is a pretty darn hectic time of the year as we move toward Christmas. I mean, it used to be Black Friday, and I guess now it's Black Thursday. I mean, it's just, we really get geared up and into the shopping mode pretty darn quick. Every Sunday, but I think especially this Sunday is also what I like to call one of those grounding moments for me. This Sunday, which marks the end of our church year, is often called the Feast of Christ the King, or the Reign of Christ. And those of you who have heard me talk about this Sunday, this particular feast, know that its origins only go back to the early part of the 20th century when Pope Pius XI in 1925 declared that the last Sunday in October, and now it turns out to be the last Sunday in November, was to be the feast of Christ the King. And he did it for a really important reason. He looked around not only Italy, but all of Europe, and he saw this growing tide of totalitarianism and communism and secularism, and it alarmed him. This was the time that Mussolini was in power in Italy, and Stalin and Hitler were just a few years away from ascending to their power. And in an effort to try to remind people of where they were to look to find guidance and direction, he established this feast of Christ the King. It really was a bold move on his part, because in the face of all of this great secular power, he was telling people, my friends, you need to look not to them for your guidance and direction in life, but you need to look to the person of Jesus, this humble person who is proclaimed a king. Not your typical kind of king, a king who is proclaimed king at his trial and even at his death. But it was an important move on his part, I think, really to remind us all, where do we look for, or where do we look to for guidance and direction? In the gospel today, Jesus says, everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice. I think making an effort to listen to the voice of Jesus as we enter this time of year can perhaps give us some guidance and some direction. And for me at least, it's a way of, again, grounding myself. It's such a time of hype and commercialization when we're told over and over again that, you know it, things are going to make you happy, and the things that you give to people are really going to make them happy. It's a message, too, that behind it, I think, says, you don't have enough, and you also aren't enough unless you have certain things. You don't have enough, and you aren't enough unless you have all these things that you're going to be told are necessary to make you happy. And I wonder what we might hear Jesus say if we took some time to listen to him in the midst of all this commotion that is starting to swirl around us at this time of the year. A writer and a commentator on this passage who I really like, David Lose, speculates about what Jesus would say if we were to listen to him right now. And he says, and I think he's kind of right, that if we paused in the midst of this barrage of advertising and everything, we would hear Jesus say 3 very simple words. You are enough. You are enough. Just as you are right now. You are enough. That's very freeing and liberating. But those are hard words to hear, I think, in the midst of all the clamor and voices in our culture telling us that our worth is derived by what we have. I think most of us would have to admit that we are probably a tad bit sickened by the commercialization of Christmas. Yet, if you're like me, you participate in it fully and joyfully. And I say, bring it on. I love it. I love the season. I love the parties. I love everything about it. But I need to pause. Why do I get excited? Well, one, I like parties. But besides that, I think at some level, and I know it's true for me at least, that many of us have bought into the idea that things and possessions can make us happy. And maybe they do temporarily, but not in the long run. And I'm not saying that we totally believe that. I'm not saying that. But it seems to have a strong enough effect on so many of us that we just get dragged right along. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm scolding people here, because I'm really not. I like giving gifts, and I like receiving gifts. Don't let what I'm saying stop any of you from giving me something. Not at all. And it's not so much that I want to say that people shouldn't have things. It's more that pounding and relentless message that we don't have enough, and that when we aren't enough, that I think is so disturbing to me. I think at some level, Jesus really wants us to have more, but more of something quite different. He wants us to have more peace in our hearts. He wants us to have more love and compassion for our brothers and sisters throughout this world. He wants us to have more deep and abiding joy. He wants us to have more of a deeper understanding of how precious each of us is to God, just as we are. That's the kind of moreness, the fullness that he wants us to have. And I think this should be a time of fullness in those areas. And all of that can only come when we take time to, in any way we can, listen to Jesus. The words of Jesus bring us freedom. Freedom from all the things in our culture that tell us that we have to have, or have to be, or have to act a certain way. They are, as I said, hard words to hear in the midst of all the clamor of this time of the year. And so it reminds me how important it is that you and I are part of a community of faith like this. Because I think we as a community of faith need to be very intentional in reminding each other that we're enough. We need to tell people that we know and interact with here at church, you're enough, just as you are. And I think that not only do we need to tell people here, we need to tell our kids that. Remind them, they are enough. Our co-workers, people we meet, you are enough. Because I don't think people are going to hear that anyplace else. I don't think you're going to hear it on the TV. And I don't think you're going to hear it on the radio. And I doubt if you're going to read it in the paper. But at church, maybe we can just be so bold enough to tell each other, you're enough, I'm enough. And I think when we get to that point, then we're in such a better place to know how much we really need in life. I hope that you will hear those words of Jesus, because I think they are true. You are enough. And I hope that you're just not going to hold on to them. Well, hold on to them, but also share them. Share them with people you know. Help them know that they are a gift, a beloved child of God as well. And that is a gift that we should make sure that we give, not only at this time of the year, but throughout the year. You are